of inspection. And in each one of those, we've had the highest marks of any fire authority in the country. And here again, we've had the top mark it would seem. I know it's the first tranche. And it is a remarkable outcome. And all I want to say at this stage is that whilst we look at the paperwork and we look at the results, this has come about by people, teams, working, delivering, and the ultimate accolade is that Merseyside is being kept safe. And I'd just like to thank, and I'm sure all of us would like to join in this formal meeting since we've had the results, in thanking all of our staff, our chief officer and principal officer team, but everybody at every level within the family of Merseyside Fire for keeping the county safe. Thank you. Just one other thing to say. We will be lobbying to seek for future meetings to be online, if possible. We can't do that legally at the moment, but part of the plan, part of the lobbying, if the statistics and the national figures keep going north, is to try and move to a more safe method of us meeting and operating. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Bryan. I can speak for all of us when you say how pleased and impressed we are with the results of the inspection. It truly is a testament to the professionalism and hard work of every member of staff here at the fire service. So we'll move on the agenda. So we've got item 1, preliminary matters. Do we have any further apologies other than Councillor Wood making some Preston? No. That's okay. Do we have any declarations of interest in relation to any item on the agenda? No. There's no matters of urgency that need to be admitted. We do have exempt items, so appendices A to E on agenda item 12 are exempt. So if any members do have any questions about these appendices, please let us know at the start of the item and at the close of the meeting to the public. If there are no questions about the appendices, then the meeting can remain open. Item 2, minutes. We approved the minutes of the previous meeting of P&R on 29th of July. Item 3, we've got the Bonfire Report.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I'll just introduce the report and then we've got a presentation from Group Manager Paul Kay, which will go into the specifics. But the purpose of the report is to inform members on the outcomes of the Bonfire Period for 2021 and the recommendation that members note the contents of the report and the impact that Merseyside Fire and Rescue Services have had on our community in the delivery of the Bonfire Plan. And that point picks up and reinforces what point we will make in respect of the Majesty's Inspectorate report, where the work that we do at preventing fires was determined as outstanding. Although I'll tell you exactly why that is the case in the presentation. So, Paul,
thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chair, elected members. Thanks for the opportunity to come and share our good work during the bonfire period. Can we just click on it? Okay, so when I had the last opportunity to present to you all, we talked about the community safety strategy and how we had the ability to turn up the volume and turn down the volume. And during the bonfire period, we certainly turned up the volume. And some of our headline figures are we had an 18.7 reduction in all deliberately set fires. We undertook 1,484 unplanned campaigns on the 4 weeks leading up to the bonfire period. 87 licenses issued, 21 PATS forms submitted. And the PATS form is where we've identified a building which is potentially liable to arson. 951 community risk management routes undertaken, and I'll explain about those shortly. 54 tonnes, which is the most we've ever lifted off the streets. A reduction in violence at work incidents and a reduction in firework incidents as well. And over 189 flight reports generated. So if we look at the performance over our last 3 years, the thing that jumps out, which you'll probably notice, is the large rise in incidents, which is always during the key nights of the 4th, the 5th and the 6th of November. And that's something that we really wanted to keep focusing and target and ensure that we had that reduction. So how did we do that? Well, we saw also a massive reduction across all districts in Knowsley, Wirral, Sefton, St Helens, and just a slight increase of 2 incidents in St Helens district. Here's our sort of league table of incidents across the 5 districts. Riverside having the most with 14 incidents, and Cherryfield having 4 at the bottom. What's noticeable is if you were to look at any kind of district ward tables over the last 5 to 10 years, some of the top performers would always be Bidston St James, Rock Ferry, Kirkdale, Princes Park, Speedgoss, Norris Green and Sherbrooke, and there's a clear defined reason why they are down at the bottom. So overall, we can see a 30% reduction in Knowsley, an 8.7% reduction in Liverpool, a 65% reduction in Sefton, a marginal increase in St Helens of only 2 incidents, and a 21% reduction on the Wirral. So, how did we go about this? Well, first of all, we go in and we target our schools. In the past, we've always looked around the schools in the different areas, asked if we could come in, and whether we could or could not was dependent on the head teacher. As Merseyside Fire Rescue Service, we sit within the Violence Reduction Partnership. I sit within the steering group, which gives me access to something called the Evidence Data Hub. And that is an evidence gathering tool which overlays our own data, it overlays hospital admissions data and police crime data around knife crime, but also it analyses school data, which is absenteeism, exclusion, suspension, the percentage of boys and girls in the school, and the percentage of children who receive free school meals. Once we overlay that data with our own ASB data, we can absolutely target the schools that we need to visit, cross-referenced against the social indices of deprivation and that highest level decile. So we knew we were going into the right schools, in the right areas to deliver our message. And we did so utilising an animation that we've created, again with the Violence Reduction Partnership, and engaged with 54 schools and 5,000 children with a multi-agency approach, as you can see in those pictures, with Lindsay, our arson officer, PCSOs and fire crews. What I talked about in the last one was about microbeat analysis, and it's something that the police utilise to deter any criminal activity with the limited resources that they have. So they may post a police officer on the corner of a particular street, and that roughly deters any criminal activity for up to 3 hours. We've adopted the same approach, and on the 4 weeks leading into the Bonfire Period, we again utilised all our data from the business intelligence reports and the fantastic work that Rob Hanson and John Fielding utilised in strategy and performance. And we targeted very, very specific areas within each ward, which we felt would need that attention. And we undertook 4 weeks of twice weekly multi-pump home fire safety reassurance campaigns. And that led to 1,484 home fire safety checks also being carried out. Again, utilising that microbeat analysis, we've introduced community risk management routes, and that is identifying where we know ASB activity to be taking place, and more importantly, when ASB activity is taking place. So what we look to do is we push our fire engines through those areas at key times, 4 p.m, 6 p.m, and 8 p.m. And the graph here shows you basically the number of routes that each fire station undertook during that period. The grand total of 951 routes is incredible and really proved its effectiveness. But as with all things new, we had to take our time, we had to embed it and keep visiting our station-based station managers and tell them about the importance of the CRM routes. What you'll see here at the beginning is, yes, we're getting out, probably putting about 15, 20 routes in, but then we had to get them back in, because what we did see was a large spike in activity in that first week, the 23rd to the 25th of October. We really needed to get that under grips, otherwise we would have seen a further spike further on. So we got over the station managers and we asked them to really push hard. And this is where you can see the grey shaded areas of the community risk management routes. What that saw then was where in previous years we had a flip and we've rapidly reduced the number of ASB fires at that key time, and we plateaued out on the spike in activity that we'd seen in each previous year during the key nights, the 4th, 5th and 6th. And again, utilise the data that was provided by strategy and performance and recognise that here was where our activities were around about 4, 6 and 8 p.m. And that's when fire crews were instructed to go out into targeted streets and have that visible presence to deter any ASB activity. As I've said, we lifted and shifted the most amount of waste that we've ever done. And again, we had multi-agency partners out with us, fire staff, operational, non-operational, all rolling their sleeves up and getting involved. Tipper trucks, again, utilising funding from local authorities to be out on the streets morning, noon and night. And again, we lifted 54 tonnes, which was an incredible piece of work over 2 weeks. To coordinate all this activity, we operated an operational support room here at the JCC just across the way, and the tactical coordination group with multi-agency partners up in the JCC. As you can see, the pictures here, we were kindly visited by Nigel Lansley, the High Sheriff, and we picture of area manager over there with Pete Clark, who was the silver lead for Bangor. And the picture utilised there is Manderson Drive, which was a really large bonfire, which was basically just being used by fly tippers. Good coordination between ourselves, local authority, Merseyside police, enabled accordance we put around that bonfire. Police were in operation, so the bonfire went ahead, and everything remained safe. No violence at work, nobody was injured, and that coordination continued all the way through the key nights and ensured that people remained safe. This again, we had another fantastic approach to social media, utilising Emma Rigby, who was absolutely brilliant over the period. And what we do is we pay to utilise social media space. So instead of tapping into our followers and the people who engage in social media through Merseyside Fire Service, we actually paid for specific postcodes. And that would mean that any person who had access to social media were reading our messages. We were visible and being interviewed across all the local regional outlets. And overall, we had a reach of about 1 million people, which again put our message across and I'm sure made an impact in the reduction in ASB fires. And what you'll see there is John Maddox, Watch Manager John Maddox, from the community safety team with over 25,000 views, and was actually trending on the NFCC workplace social media platform, which was great to see. That concludes the presentation. Our best figures ever through a coordinated approach from the fantastic staff that we've got here, but also our partnership across Merseyside.
Thank you for the presentation. I just want to start by thanking you and everyone else involved in, I call it Operation Bangor, I'm not sure if it's still called that. From a personal perspective, in my ward, I had a few meetings with yourselves and it made a big difference during that period. But just can I ask a question around incidents at work, just about more detail of what actual incidents took place around that period?
It ranged from objects being thrown at fire engines. It ranged from eggs being thrown towards arson advocates who are going about their daily business. The important thing is that we report it, so we don't brush under the carpet to ensure our figures look great. It's important that we encourage our staff to report those incidents so we can undertake proper investigation.
Yeah, it looked really good, and it was really good to see, apart from St Helens was down, it was lower. It was 60% lower in Sefton. I wondered why that was, and is the things that is happening in Sefton that aren't happening in other areas that we can learn from?
No, we're doing exactly the same in every area. The same level of approach was applied to each district. I think what happened was we utilised so much intelligence that we were able to push into certain areas, which we did see a very big decrease. Again, what you probably saw with the St Helens piece, we were monitoring that performance on a daily basis, and it was roughly taking place in and around the town centre, but it was also sporadic. It wasn't a targeted approach that you may see in some kind of park areas or in open space. This were bins, but very, very far apart and also on different days. So what we had to do was target again our approach and push our resources into those areas.
Just one more question. It's totally gone out of my head, so don't worry.
What I will say is that this work that we've undertaken, after the bonfire period, we talked about turning the volume down. We turned it straight back up again following the Liverpool Women's and that reassurance piece. We had our fire crews out on the streets, community risk management routes, reassurance campaigns across the Kensington area and the Toxteth area as well.
Sorry, James.
Well,
I noticed it's great with regards to the fire ticket, and then you have that bonfire. Is there and it might not be you that does this, but is there an aftercare sort of aftercare? But once the fires happen, because I remember I was in the north. I can't remember what ward it was, and there was a lot of kids playing with all the debris afterwards, and I wondered if there's or maybe it doesn't fall into you, but a way in which to clear up after the bonfires happen, just because of there might be sharp bits and things like that.
So absolutely right. There's two approaches there. So from ourselves, following the morning of the 5th of November, we send every fire appliance out to do what we call a sweep, and they will be out before the children go to school, and they will ensure that all fires have been dampened down. All the reports then are filtered through to the local authorities, and over those days, all that debris is removed from the streets.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So this is the second presentation. We had a presentation before, the bonfire and Halloween type of period, and we knew that this year was going to be a bit different. The locks were off, people going out. Local authorities have not arranged the large set events. So it's just interesting to see what the statistics, the outcome of that is. Thank you to all of the staff involved in what seems to be a successful, obviously the statistics coming down, but I think we're still in unusual times. I think with COVID, we can't really say that this is any level of normality. So thank you for all that's been done, and it's interesting to see the outcome of that. But I think we need to stick with the broad plan of Operation Banger, and then hopefully also in future years, local authorities will be back in the business of trying to organise distraction events in their own areas as well. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. Just thinking on your comments that you made in relation to purchasing the space on social media. I mean, I watch social media, obviously, like everybody here, but particularly on Twitter and Facebook, obviously they're linked on because it appears on all. But the huge upturn that we've had on that, it really does seem as if it's well worth the money. And clearly, thanks to Emma for that, you're quite right to mention her. But it is phenomenal, and if it's getting to areas where normally people wouldn't be following you, it's absolutely fantastic. So I'm not sort of asking for the cost of that, but usually it's pretty reasonable, isn't it? If you can get to thousands upon thousands of people for a very small charge. So however much it is, it looks as if it's really worthwhile. And just to say how pleased we were as a member for Wirral, as well as the work that went on as well. Did you mention at all the Trojan appliance? Did we have that out on
We
the
did,
night?
yes, we had those out on the key nights.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah, but please carry on with the social media. It looks as if it's paying dividends. Thank you.
And I'd just like to say on the tipper trucks and the social media, that's all funding that we draw down through local authority, so it's not actually an expense incurred cost across the authority.
Is there anything we could take forward from Operation Banger for next year? Any improvements I think we've learned from?
Yes, the one thing
there's a lot of obviously good points. Is there anything we could improve what they've got wrong, or not wrong, but improve for next year?
Yeah, I think there is. We certainly need our planning will commence a lot earlier to ensure that we have the right equipment. I think you would have seen there on some of the pictures, the images, that we were utilising tipper trucks with greed boards, not necessarily the hydraulic lifts. So we're going to get in early, get them booked. The big thing though is recognising that members of the community will have large bonfires, and to think that they won't, it's just not going to happen. So we recognise that we will work with Merseyside Police, engage with the almost non-official community members, and ensure that those bonfires are one, risk assessed, and ensure that your proper safety provisions are put in place, so that something like a Manson driver is nothing that could cause significant risk or injury that's been built into that bonfire.
I did see one bonfire on in the Dingle, which got very close to people's houses. Where it is close to people's houses, is there a strategy that they've got to speak to the people in those houses?
So, what normally happens is that those bonfires are removed if they're too close. But of course, we have arson officers and Merseyside Police who are driving around throughout the course of the evening. So they're working, outside the normal working hours, engaging with those members of the community. I know there's always one in Orwell Drive, Joe, that again, we were mindful, we've spoken with members of the community, that's been moved away further from the house where it normally is to prevent any of the guttering or window panes cracking through heat radiation.
Question?
Can I just ask, you talk about bonfires, but like in Harewood, I know that the residents do a big collection for money for firework displays. Would that come under your remit as well, or is it just the fire?
Well, we manage the bonfire. Of course, we've got protection officers who manage the licensing of the fireworks. But I think what's important is if you've got an unregulated firework display, it's important that those members of the community engage with Merseyside Police, the local authority, and ourselves to ensure that it's safe.
Thank you.
Well, in that case, I think we'll move on. Thank you for the presentation. Which is item 4, procurement and supply of smoke alarms, revised framework.
Thanks, Chair. Prepared to report to provide members that the most recent contract for procurement and supply of smoke alarms has expired, and to advise that the new contract will be awarded to Fire Blitz. And the second point being the value of the contract is likely to exceed 250,000 during the term, as a result requires authority approval. The recommendation itself is to request members approve the award of the call-off contract for the next 4 years for the supply of smoke alarms to Fire Blitz. And as members will be more than aware, a pretty significant part of the work that we do in preventing fires occurring in the first instance is through the provision of smoke alarms into people's homes, and particularly into the homes of the most vulnerable, so those individuals who are over 65, live alone, have got some kind of lifestyle and mobility challenges. And more latterly, in this integrated risk management plan, we've extended that to communities with heightened levels of deprivation. Poverty has played a significant factor of late, and we have coined a phrase where people are choosing to put food on the table rather than a smoke alarm on the ceiling. And as a result of that, we will continue to go into the communities to ensure that they are safe from fire. We deliver, and again, it's a fact, we deliver more home fire safety interventions than any other fire rescue service per head of population. And we are committed to delivering 60,000 year on year. So over the course of the 4 years, 240,000 home fire safety check visits will take place. We estimate that about 35,000 smoke alarms will be fitted of those 60,000 visits, and hence the reason why we need to have the mechanism for being able to draw down smoke alarms as and when required over that 4 year period. The procurement process is run by West Midlands Fire and Rescue Service, funnily enough, and has driven down the cost of smoke alarms significantly. And when we look at the quality of the product, the fire product, we are confident that it will hold us in good stead for the next 4 years. So, it is for, the recommendation is that members approve the award of the contract for the next 4 years, and we move to utilising the fire product to allow us to continue to do our outstanding preventative work in our communities. And, no doubt we will pick it up on the service delivery plan, but again, our performance around reducing accidental dwelling fires, fire deaths, and the like is driven by the smoke alarms in people's homes and the fire safety advice that accompany it. And if I pause at that point, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions about this?
Chair, not a question really, just a comment, just to say fully support the recommendation. Clearly see from the report that there is value for money and savings as part of the new framework, so thank you.
Okay, so the recommendation is that we agree this contract. Is that agreed by members?
Very true.
Agreed. Okay, item 5. Service delivery plan 2021-22 into September update.
Thanks, Chair. Again, the purpose of this report is to request that members scrutinise the performance of the service against the objectives and the performance targets and outcomes set out in the service delivery plan 2021-22 for the said period April to September 2021. And the recommendation is that following scrutiny, members approve the attached report for publication onto our website. Look, I'll draw members' attention to the certain parts of the report. There's 3 sections really. Service delivery plan, which is the functional plans that we put together by the directors and area managers of the service, which drive the service forward. A report around the performance of the service in regards to its response to emergency calls, etc. And also included in the documentation is the action plan, which was developed post last 2018's inspection. So we get to reassure members that we've discharged all the actions concerned with him. I'm happy to take any questions on the service delivery aspects of it, but I will draw members' attention into from page 95 onwards, which is performance for the service. I won't go into any specific details other than to reinforce the point around accidental dwelling fires continue to reduce, given that the heightened level of preventative work that we do here in Merseyside. But I will also point out an area where we are reaching the target that we'd set, which is in relation to the percentage of available shifts lost to sickness absence. Self-evidently, we are continuing to work on that, but as we are in the height of the pandemic, it should be of no surprise to anyone in the room that it's as challenging as it's ever been. But if you look at the commentary box contained on page 107, what it does to show you is the levels of sickness which would be cared by the service, with the exception of COVID. And as a result of that, we would have been below the target that we'd set ourselves. But we know it is particularly challenging, not just in relation to sickness absence, but also the implications of close contact and people being required to isolate. That said, we continue to work effectively in that regard. And then on page 109 onwards, for the conclusion of the report, it details the actions that we've taken as a service in response to Her Majesty's Inspectorate report in 2018, and you will note, members, that all of those actions have now been discharged and have moved to green, which is in no small way down to the efforts made by staff and colleagues across the service, but probably self-evident in our most recent inspectorate report, which has seen us improve yet again. And now we are on the receiving end of 3 outstanding determinations across 11 pillars. So again, I won't relay that the points that Councillor Barron has previously made, but again, a real strong performance from Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service. And I'm happy to take any questions on any aspect of the service delivery plan or our performance.
Are there any questions? No? In that case, are members happy to approve the report for publication on the website? Is that agreed?
Yes, thank you.
Item 6, the
Again, the purpose of the report is to inform members of the current risks contained within the corporate risk register, the status of those risks, and the social control measures, including updates for the period April to September 21. And the recommendation is that members approve the updated corporate risk register, which incorporates current status and identifies service risk as said to the 21st of September 2021. I've spoken at length about the corporate risk register previously. The intention in next year is to functional analysis and revise it, so it's less detailed, less varied, so we draw out the specific key risks that we would want the authority to scrutinise. But that said, we have captured every conceivable risk that we feel has the potential to affect Merseyside financiers and the delivery of services. And I'm more than happy to take any questions on any specific elements of that.
Are there any questions on the corporate risk register? No? Recommendation is that we consider the information, approve the authorities. Status of the identified service risks September to approve the updated risk register. Is that agreed?
Yes, please.
Okay. Item 7, statements of assurance.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The purpose of this report requests that members consider and approve the authority's statements of assurance 2020-2021 for the publication onto the authority website. And as indicated, it's a backward look really around assurance for the public. And the recommendations are A, that members consider the information contained within this report and approve the authority's draft statement of assurance 2020-2021. And if approved, the statement of assurance be signed by the Chair of the Fire Rescue Authority and the Chief Officer. And again, just as way of background, the Fire Rescue Services National Framework was published in 2012 and revised in 2018. Sets out a requirement on the service and fire authorities to publish an annual statement of assurance. And it says in that regard, fire and rescue authorities must provide annual assurance to their community and government on the financial, governance and operational matters. And in that respect, this is what we have sought to do. The National Framework goes on to say that the statement should outline the way in which the authority and its fire and rescue services has had regard over that period to the National Framework, Interim Risk Management Plan, and any strategic plans prepared by the authority for that period. It then also indicates that we shouldn't duplicate any of the information that's held elsewhere, but we should draw the reader to the information that we present either through our website or via other channels, and they are comfortable and content with that being the case. So you will see a number of links contained within the statements of assurance that draw members of the public to other documents held by the service, to assure them that we are delivering the best possible outcomes to our communities, both financially and we are efficient, effective, and we are looking after our people in the most appropriate ways. So the statement of assurance is contained within the report itself and from page 175 to 197. And Chair, I'm happy to take any questions around the statement of assurance or the methodology plan.
Let's go to my neck on the line here, so I hope you'll all agree.
Are there any questions about the statement of assurance? It's a legal requirement that we publish one. Do members agree that we approve the authority's draft statements of assurance? I agree. Thank you. Financial review, July to September.
Thanks, Chair. The report covers the revenue and capital budgets, reserves, and treasury management updates to the 30th of September 2021. The revenue budget position is covered in paragraph 6 to 17 on pages 201 to 204. Paragraph 7 outlines the budget movements in the second quarter, as all the adjustments to self-balancing have been budgeted for They have not impacted on the approved net budget requirement that remains at 59.250 million. Paragraph 9 reviews the robustness of the approved key budget assumptions. Members dealt with the challenge around the payroll assumption in report as outlined in paragraph 11. The adoption of the LGA FDU and the attachment framework agreed at the November authority meeting is expected to increase the administration and compensation costs by £300,000, but all other assumptions remain robust and all costs can be contained within the approved budget. Paragraphs 14 to 16 on pages 202 to 204 summarise the latest forecast revenue position. After reviewing income and expenditure, officers have identified the following variances. A net saving on employee costs of 500,000, arising from savings from non-operational establishments due to vacancies and some staff not being the top of the grade. Forecast favourable variance of £526,000 on the revenue costs associated with servicing capital expenditure funded by borrowing. This is due to the rephasing of planned capital spend in 2020-21 into future years, reducing the level of minimum revenue provision charge required for 21-22. Fees and charges income is expected to be below budget due to the impact of COVID on commercial income and the reduction in Prince's Trust funding due to Wirral and St Helens colleges having less funds available. The overall net forecast of income is in a deficit position to £200,000. Overall, as outlined in the table on page 204, a favourable variance of £826,000 has been identified. As outlined in paragraph 17, members are being asked to approve the use of the forecast favourable variance to create a £526,000 inflation reserve in light of the expected rise in inflation and the pressure this will put on future pay and price increases. And as outlined in paragraph 9, the authority may face an increase of £300,000 in the admin and compensation costs associated with implementing the LGA FDU immediate detriment framework, and therefore members are asked to increase the current pension reserve by this amount. Moving on to the capital position, paragraph 18 outlines an increase of 2.055 million in the capital programme, all of which is from by specific non-borrowing costs, as outlined in the table on page 205. The reserve position is outlined in paragraphs 21 to 22 on pages 205 to 206, and £346,000 of reserves were drawn down in the quarter to cover planned projects or spend, as outlined in paragraph 21. Paragraph 22 outlines the use of the favourable revenue variance to increase the reserves, as outlined in paragraph 17 of the report. Treasury management performance is outlined in paragraphs 24 to 28 on pages 206 to 208. The performance of Treasury management was consistent with the approved Treasury management strategy for the year. At the end of September, the authority held £61.950 million of investments, and a breakdown of these investments is contained in the table after paragraph 26. All investments are consistent with the approved investment strategy and within the limits outlined in paragraph 26. No new loans have been taken out the year so far. Members are asked to note the report, approve the revenue, capital and reserve adjustments outlined in the report, approve the use of the forecast £826,000 favourable variance to increase the inflation reserve by £526,000 and the pension reserve by £300,000, and instruct the Director of Finance and Procurement to continue to work with managers to maximise savings in 21-22. Chair, I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Just in terms of the 526, so that's in case that it goes up, wages go up in the next couple of years, increase inflation. And do you think that's going to will cover it, or what's your prediction for? I know you can't fully predict, but I'd like to just go a bit more into
Yeah.
the thought process around that.
Yeah, it's probably worth going back first of all to 21, 22, as paragraph 11 indicates we did assume a pay freeze in this year. So the firefighters' payrolls have been set at 1.5%, and the non-uniform staff have been offered 1.75%, but have yet to accept it. So members have drawn down from reserves to cover those payrolls this year. So we've got no inflation provision left now in the reserve. So what we've got at the moment in our medium-term financial plan is an assumption of 2.5% for pay awards for the next 4 years. During the 22-23 budget process, members will be asked to reconsider whether they think that's reasonable or not. Today, I think we announced CPI was 5.1%. There's pressure growing on employers to increase pay awards because not just because of inflation rate, but because in April 22, there's an employee and employer increase in the national insurance payment to 4.25%. So my view then is how realistic is a 2.5% pay award assumption. It's difficult to forecast. Today the settlement figure comes out for local government, which is the settlement figure. We'll have to feed that through the machine, see what it means. It's about affordability, and it may be that we can't really afford to offer more than 2.5. Pressure to offer more than that from the unions, so that 526,000 inflation provision equates to just over 1% in terms of a pay increase. So if you do create that inflation provision, it gives you some contingency that if next year your 2.5% pay inflation is not high enough, if it's within 1% of what the actual award is, you've got enough in that inflation provision to cover the cost in 1 year, and consider then how you make good the long-term funding of that award.
Sorry, so if you think it's going to go up by 2 point, do you think it's going to go up with 2.5%? The 526 is extra in case it goes beyond that.
So in your medium-term financial plan now, with the 2.5% assumption that we've got, the budget isn't balanced over that 4-year medium-term financial plan. So the first challenge is keeping the 2.5% assumption, making sure that the future year budgets are balanced. That's challenge 1. If we say it is 2.5%, which is reasonable, but there's a risk to that inflation provision that allows you on one-off resource to cover an additional 1% above that. If it's more than that, we would have to look at drawing off other reserves. We have a general fund reserve of 3 million, so we start to look at that as a one-off resource, and then build in the future budgets then how we deal with long-term challenge.
When was the last time we had a specific inflation reserve?
We've had one for a number of years at 500,000, and we've never had to draw down from it. But obviously in 21, 22, the pay award assumption was 0, and because the pay awards that were offered, we've cleared that now to 0, and therefore we no longer have inflation provision.
There's been some speculation that the Monetary Policy Committee might bring smart money seems to be only increasing to 40% in the second quarter. There's also been some speculation that the vote was 72 last time that they might have lost the quarter. How would that impact our inflation pressure?
That would probably link into the Public Works Loan Board borrowing rates. When a local authority wishes to borrow money, it goes to the Public Works Loan Board 99 times out of 100. So if interest rates go up, the interest you pay on your future loans will go up. So we then have to look in terms of the revenue budget. We've got about 6.5 million to cover the minimum revenue provision, the payment of debt, and the interest. So we'd have to consider in the longer term, as we take out new loans, whether we can contain them if the interest rate's higher. Within the overall 6.5 million.
Are there any further questions?
I've got just one.
Councillor Collins.
Thank you. Can I just ask, is there any impact on the delivery of the Prince's Trust programme because of the funding reductions?
You refer to the office.
Yeah, officers are currently reviewing what that impact has been. There has been a reduction in the number of courses that we can put on. But we've also found as well that there's a lot of opportunities now for young children in terms of apprenticeships. So sometimes we're coming on the reduced number of courses that we operate, and then we find that we're leaving because there's opportunities out there for them, and we don't receive payment. So what's happening at the moment is officers are looking at the whole Prince's Trust programme, not just for this year, but more for longer term, and intend to bring a report back to members on the sustainability of the Prince's Trust and what it means for the future.
Yeah, Chair, if I may comment on that as well, clearly the work that we do with Prince's Trust is one of the reasons, to be fair, that we are outstanding around prevention, because it's not just about putting smoke around people's homes, it's about the broader work that Paul's kind of articulated in Bonfire Plan, but the way that we do young people to track them from fire setting and that relationship we create in the long term, notwithstanding the fact that we as the public sector organisation, the finance service, sit in the heart of our communities and want to ensure that the young people who live in our communities are given opportunity, particularly given that some of our communities we don't not afforded to that under normal circumstances. And so it's something we are incredibly passionate about. We have seen a couple of the colleges withdraw some funding more latterly because they are not being able to secure the funding in the way that we've previously done so. So we're continuing to have that dialogue with them. Paul's reference to the Bonfire Period being able to draw down funding, to be able to maintain and deliver the Prince's Trust team programme. If we can't do it on our own, we need to do it with the college or colleges, and they need to be invested in the same way as we are to maintain and sustain the Prince's Trust programmes. It's always been a challenge. It always fluctuates. We're always kind of having that dialogue with the colleges that we work with. But we will be rest assured that we can continue to do that through 2022 to make sure that we continue to deliver for the young people across Merseyside. It's really important to us, and it's what makes us a difference as a fire and rescue service. And that's something we're incredibly passionate about, but there's a little bit of work for us to do.
Any questions? Okay, in that case, do we adopt the recommendations for agenda item 8? Is that agreed?
Please.
Okay, thank you. Item 9, Treasury Management Interim Report. Here.
Yes, thanks, Chair. The Treasury Management and Prudential Codes require the authority to prepare an interim Treasury Management report on its activities during the year to ensure they are consistent with the approved Treasury Management strategy and have remained within the approved prudential indicators. This report meets that requirement and outlines the Treasury Management activities and performance for the first half of the financial year. The interim report can be found on pages 231 to 239. And on page 232, members will find an executive summary of the key points of performance so far, and they are: no new borrowings have been arranged in the year so far or are expected to be arranged before the year end. Debt of £3 million is due to be paid this year. The authority had investments of £61.95 million at the end of September. The Bank of England base rate remained at 0.1% throughout the year. Longer-term public works loan board rates have fallen slightly during the first half of the year by 0.0 percentage point, from 2.23% to 2.177%. Treasury management activity is being carried out in compliance with the relevant codes and statutes and the borrowing treasury management approved by the authority as part of the budget setting process in February 2021. The recommendation is that members are asked to note the contents of the report. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Are there any questions about the Treasury Management?
Chair, I'm just making an overarching kind of comment here to the new members to the authority. We've seen the authority reinvest in the front line, certainly over the last 4 years, and that's on the basis of one strong principle, which is that paying off of debt and not incurring any further borrowing, so we pay off debt, and that's allowed us to reinvest in the front line because we're protecting some revenue costs in that regard. And I can check that continues to be the case because we've got to try to avoid borrowing and pay off debt to the best of our ability, which we hope to be able to sustain. And then that kind of just reinforces the fact that we are continuing to reinvest that back into frontline services.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, are we happy to accept to note the report? Thank you. Is that noted?
Noted, please.
Thank you. Item 10, withdrawal of Home Office immediate detriment guidance.
Thanks, Chair. The purpose of the report is to bring to members' attention the decision by the Home Office to withdraw their informal guidance in relation to processing eligible retiring fire pension scheme members in their legacy scheme ahead of the required legislation and regulation changes, and that the impact this decision has on the authority's decision to adopt the LGA FEU Memorandum of Understanding and associated immediate detriment framework for processing retiring fire pension members under their legacy scheme. Paragraphs 5 to 10 provide members with some background to the public pension age discrimination case and the decision by the government to allow eligible public pension members access to their legacy pension schemes over the remedy period April 2015 to March 2022. Eligible pension scheme members, however, would need to wait until the legislation and pension regulation changes are in place before they can retrospectively access their legacy benefits. And these changes are expected to be in place by October 2023. The Home Office, following a request by the FPU, issued an informal guidance note that they believe would allow fire and police pension administrators to use and allow eligible retiring pension members access to their legacy benefits in advance of the legislation and regulation changes. However, as outlined in the report, paragraph 11 and 12 and Appendix A, following further work by a Magistrates Treasury and HMRC, it became clear that the technical challenge had significantly been understated, and in particular uncertainties around the treatment of tax as allowed under current tax legislation. HM's Treasury current view is that immediate detriment cases cannot be processed before legislation is in place without considerable risk, uncertainty and administrative burdens for individuals, schemes and employees. Therefore, the Home Office has withdrawn their immediate detriment guidance. The Home Office and the Magistrates Treasury do not advise scheme administrators to process immediate detriment cases before the legislation is in place. As outlined in paragraph 13, the LGA and FBU immediate detriment framework that the authority adopted in November has the same challenges and risks that have been identified in the Home Office guidance. The FBU have written to all their members, see Appendix A, Appendix B, advising that their position remains that FRA should adopt the LGA FBU immediate detriment framework and to continue to process fire pension members under the legacy scheme in advance of legislation and regulation changes. As outlined in paragraph 15 in Appendix C, the Home Office have emailed the LGA Fire Pension League to inform them that the government does not advise schemes to process immediate detriment cases before the legislation and regulation changes are in place. The email also confirmed if fire and rescue authorities ignore the advice and decide to continue to process eligible FPS members under their legacy scheme before the legislation is in place, then all non-pension fund costs will fall on the fire authority. The LGA, Fire Pension League, and the NFCC Pension League are currently seeking a legal opinion on the immediate detriment position following the Home Office announcement, and will issue further guidance and advice to fire authorities when they receive it. The report recommends that members agree to pause processing of any eligible fire pension scheme members' legacy benefits under the LGA and the union framework, whilst the authority await further guidance from the LGA. Once this guidance is available and the officers discuss the legal advice with the authority's pension advisors, we will bring back a report to members for consideration. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair. Do you have any questions from them?
It's not a question. Okay, so it's a right mess, really. There was a meeting of the Fire Service Management Committee last Friday, and there was some disagreement between the parties there about how this should operate. But it's quite clear that the government have withdrawn the recommendation to just proceed with this. We agreed at our last meeting in November that we would honour the memorandum of understanding between employers, but it now seems that we won't be able to. It's not sensible to do that. And the recommendation here is to pause pending further legal guidance. And I think that's the best advice. That's the advice that members are being given. And I don't think we've got much choice other than to follow that. I don't like it, frankly, but I don't think we've got much choice other than to do that.
Do we have any understanding about time frames?
The LGA had a pension lead and coffee morning this week. They had expected some information from the legal advisors anytime soon, but the impression I got, it will be before Christmas, and even when they get that right, I suspect that'll be the first stage, and there'll be further stages and further advice required. It could be into the new financial year, I think, before there's clarity on this point, if at all clarity as ever comes out before legislation and regulation changes are in place. And I suppose it's important for the members to remember that nobody will lose out financially in terms of the remedy. It's a question of when payment is made. And it would be great if we could get it right first time round. One of the problems we have, as an example, the Treasury have indicated, if you've got a retired firefighter pension scheme member who moved into the 2015 scheme, when they were employed, out of their gross pay, they got tax relief on their pension contributions. You have to operate tax under the current regulations as they are now. If they wanted to move into the 92 scheme and proceed with the remedy, they theoretically owe a lot of tax for all the tax relief they got on a scheme they're no longer part of, so they'll have a big tax bill. Because they're retired, when they pay the contributions now into their old legacy scheme, they can't get tax relief because they're not employed. So there'll be a tax amount that they can't get relief on with regards to those payments. And then it's also the fact that you could find that they exceed their annual allowance because going into a new scheme, say 5 years worth in 1 year, the pension goes right up and they get an annual allowance tax bill. All this will be resolved in the legislation and regulations get changed. But as administrators, we've got to operate within the current tax rules. So how do we do that? You know, you could end up, an individual could be theoretically in the short term worse off. And that's the difficulty that we face if we try and do this under the current tax rules.
And just to add to that, Chair, if I may, I think Councillor Barnes referenced the fact that it's complex. And Ian's description there of sort of the kind of complexity of it is self-evident it is. And hence the reason why on the removal of the Home Office's informal guidance, the employees have gone back out to get a legal opinion on what services authorities should do next. And hence the reason why that legal advice will be actually pivotal. Now, I need to reference that at an extended time. My understanding was that legal advice was due imminently, but notwithstanding that, we know how it works with Bradford's for sure. imminently very well be before Christmas. There probably will be that ongoing dialogue around the detail contained within, which we will have to explore. But what we wouldn't want to do is for the authority to continue to embark on something which actually is very, very detrimental in the longer term aspirations for the sales. So we need that legal advice to be able to support the next steps or describe the next steps. We think appropriate to consider and take forward. That's the reason why the report is suggesting we pause while we await the legal advice that the requested and secured.
So effectively we're voting on to pause, so we're not actually making a decision. I'm happy to do that. On a local level, are we talking to the FBU, or is it all done at on a local level as well as national?
Well, Ian's been talking about that with the 5 years union around, and the Fire Officers Association as well, to be fair, around the implications, where we're up to, and their understanding of the challenges. They equally know how complex it is and how difficult it is. And I spoke to the local officials for the FBU yesterday and went through the paperwork. So they are absolutely clear on the position that we were taking forward and the logic and the rationale behind it. There's no one in this room, myself, Ian, or any of the staff members, we don't want to see people receive the attention that they are due. We just can't afford to get the decision wrong and then end up costing the authority huge amounts of money that we feel is more appropriate paid somewhere else, if that makes sense. So we are keeping them abreast. It is complicated, really, really complicated, but we are keeping our local trade unions abreast.
So our members need to approve the recommendations.
Just to say to them, all of those financial things that we've just discussed will be part of the strategy day discussions that those members will have as well.
Okay, item 11, the contract award for textile fire gloves.
Thanks, Chair. The North West Fire and Rescue Procurement Group coordinates the specifications for the supply of firefighter structural textile fire gloves. The specification ensure the fire gloves meet the highest standards required to ensure firefighter safety, and that suppliers can deliver the required range and scope of products to reflect a diverse workforce, so all firefighters' needs are met. Tenders were invited from suppliers on the 20th of December 2019, and the bids were received by the end of February 2020. Following the conclusion of the technical evaluation, the North West Procurement Group, through Merseyside Procurement Service, now wish to award a framework agreement to the successful supplier, Flame Pro Global Limited. As the potential value of orders over the life of the contract may exceed 250,000, standing orders require that the authority must approve the award of the contract. And therefore, members are asked to award the framework agreement for structural fire gloves to Flame Pro Global Limited. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions about fire gloves?
What colours do they come in?
It's probably worth pointing out as well that we buy the leather gloves, so we don't buy the textile gloves.
Yeah, any colour you want, as long as it's black.
No questions. Okay, we're happy to accept the recommendation of fire. I agree.
Great.
Okay, we've got item 12, and we'll remember that the appendices to item 12 are exempt. So does anyone wish to raise any questions about the exempt part of the report? No, in that case, the chief.
Yeah, that's what I will do is I will ask to sat to my right hand side and then we make comments on the contents of the report, because talk about the complexity of pensions and the immediate detriment. Some of the work around airwaves and the emergency service network is different, but it's technically complex too. But the purpose of the report is to seek approval to continue as a Home Office emergency service network to the ESN assurance partner and approve Merseyside Fire and Rescue Authority's funding of a ICT technical refresh as part of the business case to make Merseyside Fire Rescue Services ESN technically ready. And this is about being able to mobilise resources and communicate on the instant ground between blue light partners as much as anything else to try and simplify the task. And the second part of the report is to inform members of the need to install a dispatch communication server as a requirement to continue to use airwave beyond its expected date due to the delays in the national ESN programme. So there's implications around the delays. And the recommendations, therefore, that members note the business case to make Merseyside Fire Service ESN ready, and that the Home Office will provide funding for some aspects of the associated Capita ESN technical ready activities. B, approve an ESN ready capital scheme for £661,600 in 2021-2022, of which £195,658 will require Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service funding. Note, however, that this may be reduced if the Home Office commits to further funding of a greater amount of talent expenditure. C, continues to support Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service in working with the Home Office as a insurance partner and part of the national programme. And D, approve Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service ICT capital budget growth of £108,000 in 2022-2023 to install the DCS, which is the Dispatch Communications Server. The more complex detail is contained within the body of the report, but I will ask Elliot to step up and just make comment, Bill, on anything, because he needs to consider part of their deliberations.
As members are probably aware, Airwave is our current communications platform as used by all emergency services. The ESN is a planned replacement of that Airwave solution. There are delays in the programme. The expected transition is now 2026, which is partly why the DCS element is a requirement. The background to our assurance partner activities: we, along with 4 other members of the emergency services, became an assurance partner in 2020. Key to the development and testing of the emergency services network is the involvement of the assurance partner agencies. There are clear advantages in us continuing to be an assurance partner. There are early benefits to both the service and to the national programme. The potential go live for us as an assurance partner is currently the end of 2023, with the remaining user organisations following on the national transition up into 2026. Thank you.
Chair, back to you yourself for any questions that I myself.
Do you have any questions about the DDS? In that case, my question, the 2025, is that a hard deadline for the last transition?
At the moment, the plan is that Airwave will be switched at the end of 2026. So therefore, there is a requirement for all user organisations to be transitioned on to the new ESN prior to that date.
Okay, and there have been several successful trials. Have there been any problems encountered with the trials?
As you would expect with a new technology solution, there have been a few undocumented features encountered during the trials. These have been addressed by the many players within the Home Office and the suppliers, and we are continuing with a roadmap leading to the transition date you mentioned.
And somebody, there was an earlier comment from a member about whether or not it was possible to simply use mobile phones instead. Is there a specific reason? Are they What's the advantage of this particular network?
Well, the emergency services network is built on the commercial mobile phone network. It utilises the large number of stations that are dotted around this country, and it does provide an element of enhanced security and reliability, because we occupy a prioritised section within that commercial network, so that effectively we would always have communication.
Absolutely, thank you. In that case, do members seek to continue the Home Office Emergency Service Network programme and approve the recommendations set out in point 3 of the report? Is that agreed? All right, brilliant, thank you. Okay, well that brings us to the end of the meeting, so thank you very much. And I think this is our last one, is it, before Christmas?
Well, yeah, other things you may be equal, yeah.
Well, hopefully I'll see you all in the new year. Right.
Yes, thank you. Very happy Christmas, one.